So what should the average citizen know about what's coming up in the budget this coming year?
Well, actually, with this budget that's coming up, the average citizen should be pretty excited about the budget because we had such a good fiscal year, the one that we're in right now, where we're going to end up with a significant surplus and a significant fund balance. That put us in a position to put a lot of really good and exciting projects in next year's budget. So I think the citizens should know that they're going to see a lot of enhancements next year. There's not going to be any layoffs. There's not going to be service cuts or anything like that. So I think they can rest easy knowing that we're not in a position like we have been in the past where we've had to look at doing cuts to people and to services. We're not in that position this year. So from a budgetary standpoint, we're in really good shape going into the next fiscal year.
But we still have our lingering problem with public safety pensions, right?
We do. There are two things that always have me concerned. Well, two things that have me concerned. One always has me concerned, and that's what you just referenced, police and fire pension payments. We have, in a 20-year span, over $800 million that the city has to pay into police and fire pensions, unless the state does something to change our deadline date, which is right now 2040. If that doesn't change, then yeah, we got to come up with over 800 million. 500 million of that will come from property taxes, but that means 350 million has to come from other resources that otherwise would be going to departments to provide services. So that's a looming concern that I've had for a number of years, and citizens should have as well, because it is a problem. We've got to pay for them. We don't have an obligation. And to pay for them, you either have to increase revenue or you have to make major cuts to operations and services. Neither one are good options. So that's a concern. The other thing that's got me concerned, in particular this fiscal year, is the looming threat of economic downturn, specifically a recession. One of the things in my presentation the other day was showing this probability chart when you have a flattening of the yield curve, the Treasury yield curve, potentially to inversion. That always signals the potentiality, or it heightens, the potentiality for a recession. And we're seeing that right now. And that's one of the things in my presentation, if you look at it. We're seeing that spread between the 10-year bond and the 3-month T-bill decline. So when you see that happening, you're flattening out the yield curve, and that's not a good thing. And it's definitely not a good thing if it gets inverted, which is what the chatter is right now. So I'm pretty concerned about potential economic downturn, another recession happening this year. I hope it doesn't happen, but there's a lot of turmoil in the markets right now and a lot of uncertainty. Just look at don't look at your portfolio is what I recommend right now. But if you do, you'll see, you'll probably be surprised if you haven't looked at it in a while, because the market has really come down quite a bit over the last month or so. And that is signaling a lot of concern and fear out there on a macroeconomic level. So those are the two things that have my concern. One, an ongoing concern with police and fire pensions. Two, specifically in the coming year, the looming threat of recession.
Does the city have a rainy day fund? And how well are we prepared if we do go into a recession?
So we have reserves that, referred to reserves, a fund balance. So at the end of this year, we're projected to have a corporate fund. And when I say corporate fund, I mean our general fund, which most people know pays for police, fire, public works, mayor office, my office, that kind of thing. So that's the one people are most familiar with. So when I say corporate fund, we're talking about a potentiality for a $50 million fund balance at the end of this year, just due to a perfect storm of things that have really made it a good year for us. That is what puts us in a position to be able to weather a storm in an economic downturn. As long as we're disciplined and responsible, which we have been ever since the last Great Recession, when the city was not prepared and did have a lot of pain it had to go through. We've been working ever since then to make sure we're not back in that position, and we aren't, because we put ourselves in a position to weather that kind of a storm. So if it happens, we'll be okay. If it's prolonged for a number of years, that might become problematic, but typically things like that are not multi-year events. They might be a year or so, in which case we can weather that storm just fine. We put ourselves in a position to do so.